All right. Hey there, folks. Welcome back to a whole new season. And even though conventions, signings, and other live events are officially back on track, I figured I would keep bringing book tour to you. So, welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster, intriguing interviews with creative minds. Now, I really wanted to kick off this season with someone who doesn't hold back. And I couldn't think of anyone better than my pal, John G. Hartness. One who takes no nonsense from anyone. John is the author of multiple series across comedic horror, urban fantasy, and the award-winning Quincy Harker Demon Hunter Dark Fantasy series. He is also the publisher of Falstaff Books and founder of the SAGA Genre Fiction Writers Conference. Welcome, John.
Hey, Russ. How you doing, bud?
All right, good. Always great to see you. Just a heads
All, always good to be seen.
Always good. All right, my friends, just a heads up to the folks at home. Feel free to send me notes or questions you have for John in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, buddy. As we always do, we're going to start at the beginning. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in an unincorporated part of Western York County, South Carolina called Bullock Creek. If you zoom all the way in on your map, about an hour and 20 minutes south of Charlotte, where I live now, you can see a teeny tiny spot that says Bullock Creek. It was completely unincorporated, and when I was living there, it was 6 miles to the nearest place to buy a gallon of milk or a gallon of gas. So when I talk about being a country boy, I ain't screwing around, kids. I mean, it was an hour drive to the hospital, half an hour to high school, not because of traffic. It was just that far. It was 17 miles along back roads. So I grew up out in the country
Huh.
and stayed there until I went to college. And
Well,
the
all right, so,
running the running joke in
uh,
my life has been that I've slowly been moving up Highway 49 in the Carolinas because I started in Western York County. I went to college at Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and now I live in Charlotte. And you can draw a line following Highway 49 through those areas.
all right. So talk to me about your living experience incredibly different from mine. I was a suburban kid, with houses on every side. You could ride your bike for 20 miles in any directions, and there was always people around. So what's that like to be kind of, sequestered kind of in the boonies? Like, I mean, honestly, did you have a house where it was, you honestly couldn't see the next house, or like what was the community like? Like, what was the setup there?
Where I grew up, the house I grew up in was the house my father built when he got out of the Army in 1951. And it was across the highway from the house that he had lived in with his father. So I grew up looking out my front door at my aunt's house, where my closest neighbors were right across the highway, and and that's where my playmates were. They were my best friends. My sister had a mobile home to, if I'm looking at my aunt's house out my family's front door, I can see my sister's mobile home to the right. I can see one of my cousin's mobile homes to the left, and my brother's trailer is behind my aunt's house. So there were people within quarter mile, half a mile, and you could still ride your bike 20 miles in any direction. You were just going to see more cows than people.
So wait, so hold on. So go back for a second. So when you say the father that your house built, now, does that mean he physically actually swung hammers and built it, or he had it built?
Yes to both. He hired My grandfather owned a sawmill. So my father worked in the sawmill and milled the lumber for the house that he and other people that he hired
Wow.
built.
Okay.
Now,
Wow.
my dad didn't do any of the plumbing or electrical, thank God.
Right. Right.
But yeah, he built a chunk of the house him with his own two hands.
And this is,
And
and you said this was in the 50s, you said, right?
yeah, it started construction in 51, I believe.
Wow. So
I,
is that
I
where
wasn't there for that.
and you said he grew up right
He
across the way.
my family has very deep roots in Western York County in South Carolina, deeper than the nation, actually.
Oh,
There's,
really?
yeah, my ancestors were deeded property in Western York County by King George III
Wow. So you guys were there before the
before
Revolutionary
there was a
War.
United States.
Wow.
Yes. The first John Hartness in America was a lieutenant in the British Army.
So your family predates America in
Yes.
America.
We were some of the original um, colonizers and thieves of property in South Carolina. Yes, we
Wait,
were.
so hold on. So go back. So your distant relatives were
Sure.
actually part of the British Army.
Hmm.
And so what happened? So so what, they end up settling here? What's the story there? How did that happen?
I don't actually know.
Okay.
I just know that a Lieutenant John Hartness moved to York County, and I don't know why.
Huh.
It's not something I actually have a distant cousin who's written a book about the progress of my family from England to the United States, but it's not a memoir. It's more
Right.
just an overblown family tree
Right. Wait,
with
and that original guy, his name was John as well, John
the
Hartness.
first guy, yeah, was John Hartness.
Wow, that's trippy.
It is a little bit, especially when I go to the church where that I attended growing up, which doesn't quite predate America, but is one of the oldest churches in South Carolina. Um, I go to that, I drive past it, and there's this row of headstones, and the front row, half of them have the same last name as me.
Oh,
And then the other half, all but two or three, are related to me through marriage. It's either Hartness, Feimster, McKnight, and those are
wow.
all people that I'm related to. So we
Whoa.
have incredibly deep ties
Wow.
to the community in the region.
All right, so hold on. So you mentioned you have a brother and a sister, you said?
I have two brothers and a sister, yeah.
So what's the lineup? Like oldest, where do you fit in there?
My brother Bob is my brother Bob is 72. My sister Bonnie, who some folks are watching this may have met her at conventions. She works with me from time to time now. She is 17 years older than me, so she is 68. My younger brother is 67, and I'm 51.
Well, so that's a big gap between. So you didn't really, so
Dad,
within,
Dad
you didn't
forgot it
grow
was
up.
loaded,
Right.
and it just went off one night, and 10 months later, here I was.
So you didn't really, as a kid, you didn't really grow up with your siblings because they were much older than you.
No, it was much more like an older cousin,
Right.
aunt, uncle relationship growing up. My younger brother, Tom, lived in the house with us until I was 7 or 8. Um, but my sister and my oldest brother, they both got married within a year of me being born. So so they were both out of the house by the time I was cognizant of anything.
I mean, so what's that like, especially to have, so you're the youngest of the four
I'm the youngest
by a lot,
by a lot, but it's also a lot like being an only child. I
right?
got the advantage of my parents being very tired
Right.
by the time I came along.
Right. They're like, just do what you want.
Yeah, but I still had all of the have to entertain myself
Right.
of
Because you,
being the oldest or only, because the age gap between me and my
right.
cousin was about 4 years. So there was a good chunk of time where he was too little to play with,
Right.
or I was too old to play with a little kid or
Right. Okay.
whatever.
So let me ask
So
you that,
yeah,
right. So
yeah.
you've got this, I mean, this is kind of a really interesting dynamic, especially because of the gap in the ages, but you had mentioned that. So did all three of your siblings live really, it was at least two that you said, or did all three live stone's throw from where you were?
No, Bob left.
He did.
Bob went to college and never lived in York, has not lived in York County for
I
a
see.
day since then.
Right.
He went to the University of South Carolina, became a school teacher, then he went to the very low country of South Carolina, small town called Ridgeland, and he taught there, and then he moved to Newberry, South Carolina, in the middle of the state, and taught there and was a principal there until he retired.
So let me ask you, I mean, given the fact that, I mean, your family was part of like literally the original settlers of your region, does that give you, I mean, even were you cognizant of it then and or now that, most of us, we live wherever we live, right? Maybe you move once in your life, sometimes more, sometimes less, but you've got roots in your community in a way that very few people probably ever experience. Did you have a sense of sort of like,
I didn't when I was young.
right?
I knew that my family was influential in the area, but it was because of specific things that my parents were doing. My father was the chief of the volunteer fire department when I was a little kid, and that was a big deal to me as a little kid because my
Right,
dad's the fire chief.
right.
Um, I didn't realize at the time that being chief of a volunteer fire department is like being the secretary of a not-for-profit. You're the person who's looking around when they say, if you want to do this, step forward. And everybody around you takes a big step back, and then you're the
Yep.
one standing up front. But my mother was on the board of deacons for our church, and that's a position of some prominence.
Right.
So I knew that they had stroke, but I didn't realize that the deep roots my family had within the community that went back generations.
So now that you're obviously in a place where you have more perspective, I mean, you can intellectually wrap your mind around it, but does it have any sort of emotional, spiritual, psychological resonance for you that you have this deep history, or is it just sort of like an interesting factoid?
It's home.
Right,
I haven't lived in that house for 30 years. 32 years?
right,
Uh, yeah, I haven't lived in that house since the 90s,
right.
but it's home. And as soon as I get past York, South Carolina, as soon as I get past York driving
Mhm.
to the family home, which my sister and I now own together since our parents have passed, um, this just sense of belonging. Whatever happens in that part of the world for me, that's still home.
Right, right.
I have much deeper roots there than I do in Charlotte, and I've lived in the house I'm sitting in for 25 years.
Right.
I've lived in this house longer than I've lived in that house.
Right, you can't compare those kind of
No.
experiences just because you've got, I mean, your family literally has centuries
Yeah.
in that region. Wow. Okay, so let me ask you. So when you were a kid, so what were you into? Like what kept you busy? What were
Books,
you books?
books. I read voraciously. And it was all the stuff that my siblings left when they moved out. So I read the stuff that they had been into. So Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, and Trixie Belden were the landscape of my childhood. And it wasn't until sixth grade or so that I started looking at science fiction and fantasy because my oldest brother, Bobby, was into horror. So when he would come visit for a holiday, he would often leave whatever book he finished, and I would take it
Right,
because if my older brother was into it, it must be cool.
right.
So
Okay.
that got me Salem's Lot and The Stand and Stephen King stuff that I should not have been reading at that age, but that is the story of Gen X.
Right. Of course, we were all like that, right?
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you're like we grew up during the same time. We're 70s and 80s kids.
yeah,
So, okay, so you were into
nobody should be reading the shit at 9 years old that
no,
we were reading at that age.
no, for sure. I mean, I remember I mean, this is a true story. I mean, my dad I mean, he showed me Apocalypse Now when I was like 8.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I
I mean,
was reading I was reading Salem's Lot, waiting for the bus in sixth grade.
yeah, yeah. So, were you kind of at that time, would you consider yourself kind of a loner, or did you have other kid
Yeah.
friends who were like into the same things you were into, or or
I had
not?
a couple of really close friends
Right,
growing up, but I wasn't a popular child.
right.
I I was one of the smartest kids in my grade in a rural, very working class, very agrarian setting where being the smartest kid in school was not really, it
Hip.
wasn't a bonus
Yeah,
socially.
right.
It wasn't valued socially. It was, I mean, my teachers loved me, but my and I've always had a smart mouth and I've never had much of a filter,
Probably why we get along so well.
probably. But that is not how to make friends and influence people when you're 7.
No, that's for sure.
So I had a couple of close friends, but I spent a lot of time solo.
Right. Now, was that kind of how it was for you, really kind of all the way up through even through high school, or did you sort of as you got
Yeah.
older, did you kind of find your a little bit more of a community, or did that come later?
I really found myself and confidence in my ability to find a found family group, whatever word you want to use for it, um, in the summer between my junior and senior years of high school. I participated in a program the state of South Carolina had called the Governor's School, where they took one student from each school district around the state, and it was an application process, and you wrote an essay to get in, and you had to have certain academic qualifications, which I held the record at the time of having the lowest class ranking of any governor's scholar for the year of 1990. I'm particularly proud of that. I'm in there with all these people who are trying to be valedictorian, and I'm like, I just want to get good enough grades so that I can get a scholarship. I don't actually care about standing up in front of people and talking at graduation.
Right.
But when I went there with these other students, one, everybody was the smartest person in the room.
Right.
So it was the first time I'd been in a class full of 20 or 30 people, and all of them were as smart as me. And I got to learn what it meant to make friends when your parents weren't arranging meetings with these people, and when you're not making friends with somebody because they're the next seat to you in
Just out of
class.
convenience. Right.
You're making friends because you do share interests or you do just get along.
Yeah.
So that was a real change for me, and it was great.
Yeah. So let me ask you something. So, you and I have obviously connected a lot over the last couple of years. You are now, as I am, you're quite vocal with your support over the LGBTQ community.
Yes, absolutely.
We share, basically identical values in that regard. Obviously, when we were kids, the conversation was completely different than it
Oh
is
yeah.
today. I mean, and also regionally, it was also different. So, what was your
Yes.
experience with that community when you were young, and how or if did that shape your attitudes as, into adulthood and up till now?
I didn't have any experience with the LGBTQ plus community when I was young. I went to school with people who I found out later are LGBTQ, but I didn't know that at the time. And if I had, or the people who did find out that my friends were gay or lesbian or anything different, it didn't go well for them. Um, it wasn't until it wasn't until college that I met my first person who was openly LGBTQ plus. My friend Jay and I were sitting talking in my dorm room one time, drunk as Cooter Brown. My God, we were hammered. And he made some comment, and I was like, I don't know what you mean by that. He said, I mean, I'm gay. I was like, okay. And he said, is that a problem? I said, I don't know. You want to sleep with me? I said, no. I said, okay. I don't want to sleep with you either. Is that a problem? No. I said, all right, we're fine.
Yeah, we're all good.
And he was my friend, and
Regardless. Right.
I knew what
Right.
was going on. I was ignorant, but I wasn't stupid.
Right.
But having someone who was already my friend be my first introduction to someone who was openly gay was very useful for me, because I was like, okay, well, he was Jay 30 seconds ago. He's still Jay
Now.
now.
Right.
So it must not be a thing. Um, so yeah, I didn't have any exposure growing up to people who were out. I remember when Ellen DeGeneres made the cover of Time or Newsweek
No.
with, "Yep, I'm gay."
No.
And everyone in the free world was like, "Yeah, we know." But then she lost her TV show.
I know that was, isn't that unbelievable that, if it was today, no one would even pay attention. But
Yeah,
but back then, I mean, she was just, I mean, for a while, she
she
was
was
in,
radioactive.
yeah, it was
And I mean, she may be radioactive again, but
for different reasons.
for different reasons.
Right.
It and college really shaped a lot of my views
Right.
on LGBTQ plus equality, because I then majored in theater.
Okay.
There may or may not be a lot of homosexual folk in theater. This
Stop.
could, some as a,
No. No.
I know, Kel fucking Surprise, right? So when I'm sitting there talking to my college roommate, another friend of mine, and we're talking about, so why, and I'm asking, I'm like, so why are you gay? He said, because I'm gay. Why are you tall? I was like, but isn't this a, and he said, look, how long have you known me? And at that point, I said, 3 years.
Right.
How many people have you known me to date? And I said, one. And he was kind of a dick. He said, yeah. Do you think I would go through that shit by choice?
That's a fair point, right?
I was like, fair enough.
Right.
Because at this point, we're both 20 and 21-year-old dudes.
Right.
It made perfect sense to me that he would not have limited his dating pool
Right.
by
Unless,
a choice.
right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not that I had significantly better luck than him in college,
but
but
but hey.
uh, but I was failing in a bigger pool.
Yeah, yeah, right. Weren't we all right?
Yeah,
All right, fair enough. So let me just one more question just on this thread because you mentioned
yeah.
being a theater major.
Hmm.
So what was that like for you, and how or if did that shape you kind of moving forward, or was it just kind of like something you did?
Well, I enjoyed theater. I did a couple of plays in high school and I liked them, and I was decent. I was never going to be, I was never going to be the guy taking home any Emmys, since we're just a couple of days removed from this year's Emmys. I was never going to be that great an actor, and I was never going to be a leading man. I didn't have the look, but I had a facility with words, and I could speak clearly and remember my lines, and I could manage to not trip over the furniture. I was a really solid guy on stage. But when I learned that you could participate in theater and have that closeness with people, because the closeness between a cast is insane.
Right.
You're living with these people for weeks and weeks, and you're almost like a very dysfunctional
No, fam.
family.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's so much that goes into it, right? Just
But
the
when I
stress.
realized that you could be part of that and not have to learn lines, and I could learn about lighting and still get that emotional response from an audience, then I really dove in.
Right. Then it clicked for you.
Yeah, it really did.
All right, so let's take a look at into your author life as you and I
Sure.
are both in. So when did you first get for you serious about writing and however you define serious?
In the year 2000, I was at my family home for Thanksgiving, and we had all just stuffed ourselves silly, and nobody wanted to watch football except my oldest brother, so we overruled him. And we're flipping around ESPN, and the World Series of Poker came on the television.
Okay, right.
And there was this fat schlub accountant from Tennessee by the name of Chris Moneymaker, real name, swear to God, who was playing poker for $1 million on a $39 tournament victory. He had played an online poker tournament and won a seat into a $10,000 poker tournament, and now he was one of the last 8 or 9 people trying for $1 million. And I swear this will become relevant to my writing journey eventually. I decided that if that fat shlomo could do it, this fat shlomo could do it.
Okay.
So I started trying to learn how to play poker. And I found that the best way for me to do that was by reading blogs of poker players and other people who were trying to learn it. Because when Chris Moneymaker won that $1 million, it created an incredible boom in the poker industry, and it literally, it was called the Moneymaker effect.
Right. I remember that.
And before you could turn around, every casino in the country had a brand new poker room, and everybody was playing Texas Hold'em, and
Right.
everybody got a set of poker chips for Christmas the next year. Well, I was reading these blogs, and a lot of these poker bloggers were telling stories about games they played in, telling stories about trips they took, and some of them were telling fictitious stories about made up gambling trips. And I was like, that's cool. I want to hang out with these people. And then I saw that they were doing weekly poker tournaments on Poker Stars and on Party Poker. But the only way you could get in was if you had a poker blog. So I started a poker blog, and I would write about my terrible poker play and the stupid things that I found myself involved in. And I got into playing poker with these folks and became friends with them. And then we would meet up. I went to Greenville, South Carolina, and met some of them at one of their houses. We got together in Las Vegas and had private poker tournaments. And I then some of us started getting jobs writing for poker websites and doing tournament coverage. And I glommed onto that. So I spent about 4 years covering the World Poker Tour and the World Series of Poker for a string of websites. And I did about 500 articles on poker tournaments, was translated into, I think it was 22 languages in 27 countries.
Wow. That's trippy.
Far more people have read my poker journalism work than have read any of my genre fiction.
Naturally, right.
And that's when I started thinking, I can kind of write. Because I hadn't written for years. I had poured all my creative energy into theater.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But as we age, climbing A-frame ladders becomes a lot less appealing.
Sure does.
And as we grow in diameter, it becomes less appealing for the ladder too. So I started thinking that maybe I could write as a supplemental income. And then these poker sites were paying me significant money to do so. And then I was like, well, but I've got other stories I want to tell.
Right.
And so I started. I transitioned my poker blog into just a general lifestyle blog. And then I started posting chapters of my first novel. And then I finished the book. And
here we are.
yeah.
So let me ask you this. So your focus as an author has predominantly been in urban and dark fantasy and some comedic horror. So what is it about those genres that most appeal to you as an author?
Well, it's a lot of what appeals to me as a reader too.
Right. Yep.
And for me, the characters are very relatable. I I don't write much science fiction because I don't have the grounding in science, and research with my ADHD brain is I didn't get the hyper focus on research that some people who have ADHD have. So research on science for a book drives me up a tree, so I don't do it. And if I do urban fantasy, my world building is in Google Maps, and I don't have to draw a map,
Right.
and I don't have to make up the world because the world's here. I just have to tweak it a little.
Right.
So I can get straight to the character and the action and the snarky dialogue and the dick jokes, which is what I'm here for.
Exactly.
The Unforgiven, or The Seven Unforgiven, is my most recent, and it's actually a high fantasy novel where I did build a world. Because that's another thing that I really love. I'm a big fan of Ray Feist and Tad Williams and and Misty Lackey and a lot of the people that I read growing up. And Unforgiven is finally the kind of book I wanted to write when I started writing. Um, but
Okay.
yeah, mainly because it lets me get straight to the bits that are really interesting to me,
Right.
because world building isn't on my list.
All right. So just a quick interlude for folks who came in a little late. If you have any questions or comments for John, just send them in the chat box and we'll get to a few at the end of the show. So let me ask you, so when you sit down to write, do you write where you think the audience will be, or do you write for yourself and then just assume that you'll find the audience?
Hmm. I like the way you phrase that. Um, I write my book. I I assume that I'll find an audience, and that is the overweening arrogance of 30 something books and having a little bit of a built-in audience. But I I try to make my books a product of their time
Right.
as a as opposed to trying to be timeless. But that also means that sometimes I
Creative error.
might, yeah, sometimes I might miss.
Fair enough. All right. So
But
let me,
no,
all right.
I'm writing my book, and I'm writing my characters and hoping that people will come along and join me for the ride and enjoy the trip.
So you're writing for you and just figuring like, hey, if I'm having a good time, I'm going to assume that other people will as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
No one with any sense in how to write to market would have Bubba the Monster Hunter engaging in hand-to-hand combat with a naked Sasquatch.
Well, what else would you write?
I, you can go to you when you're done watching this video, you can go
Yeah.
to the Falstaff Books YouTube channel
Yeah.
and see that video where I do a live reading of what the scene we have come to call Squatch Dong.
Okay, well, all right, Squatch Dong it is.
Yeah,
All right. So let me ask you. So the last half dozen years, and the last few in particular, have been, in fairness, a waking nightmare for a lot of people and to varying degrees. The pandemic, gun violence, the Cheeto, global and domestic political events. Has it changed the way you write at all? Or
absolutely.
in what ways?
Sandy Hook changed the way I wrote.
Mm,
It goes back further. Um, I write urban fantasy. There's a lot of guns in urban fantasy.
right,
I'm not a gun guy.
right,
I've been very outspoken about my opinions that common sense gun control is the only reasonable way to keep our children and our families safe.
preaching to the choir.
But I also write characters that carry a lot of guns and shoot a lot of people. And I started after Sandy Hook, I made a concerted effort to never again show death by gun violence without it having a cost.
Right.
Because
Okay.
I do feel like we, as members of the media, film, TV, books,
Right.
songs, all of it, we do hold some responsibility for portraying gun violence with no consequence to anyone.
Right. It's just glorified nonsense at that.
Yeah. You know, if I get shot right here on a TV show, I'm going to go, or
Right.
maybe fall down and I'm going to get back up and be back in the fight. If I get shot right here,
You're done.
if I live,
Yeah. Yeah.
if I live, because the brachial artery and the subclavian arteries are right here, it's entirely possible I'll die.
Right.
And it's also quite likely that I will never use this hand
Yeah.
again
Right.
correctly.
Yeah. Instead of like being back in full strength like next week.
Right. So Sandy Hook changed the way I portray gun violence in my books. And in 2020 in Charlotte, there were significant protests all through the city.
Right.
And I sat here, and I'm probably going to get emotional because rage, honestly. Um, I sat here in this chair, looking at this screen, watching people I knew get herded by the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department down the streets into a fucking kill box where they had pepper balls rained down upon them from shooters who had positioned themselves on the second or third floor of a parking garage and set themselves up in a shooting gallery.
Oh, God.
And the cops weren't trying to get people out of downtown. No, they were herding them down one street, up another street where they had blocked off one end with tear gas.
Torture
They'd
them.
blocked off the other end with tear gas. Every building was shut down. And then you had guys shooting pepper spray balls down onto the crowd. And I sat here just sobbing.
Madness.
And I thought to myself, as I got to the point after that where I could continue working on books, and I was like, I can't keep having two of the major secondary characters in two of my series be members of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department.
Right.
So I wrote a very similar scene into Harker 7 and had one of my characters walk in and resign over it.
Right.
And that's all I could come up with
Right.
to show my disgust
Yeah.
at that behavior
Yeah.
by my local leadership. One of these guys that was getting pepper sprayed was one of our city council members.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And he only got into politics because of protests several years earlier from the last time the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department shot an unarmed black man. He's also now running for higher office in the state, and he will absolutely have my vote in a few weeks. But yeah, the pandemic, and I write essentially police procedurals.
Right.
The Harker books and the Black Knight books are basically murder mysteries at their core, and they follow the beats of a police procedural. So I had to figure out how my changing feelings about the police could be reflected in those books, because I'm not going to sit here and say that this behavior is okay in my books while I'm sitting here telling you that it's abhorrent.
Right.
So yeah, it absolutely changed the way I write.
I hear you, my friend. All right.
And I think it has to.
Yeah. I mean, if world events don't, I mean, they affect us all, and
Yeah.
it's very difficult. Well, it's difficult for me to completely, we can compartmentalize, but only to a degree. I mean,
Yeah.
I know certain things that have happened. You were talking about it before the show started, and I'm not going to discuss it on the air, that happened in my personal life that
Sure.
have affected if you read any of my books over the last 6 or 7 years, you will see a part of my personal life in every one of them. And if you know my story well enough, you'll go, oh, I see what you did there, because
Oh yeah.
I've seen just the effects of so many disturbing behaviors up close and personal
Yeah.
that, I mean, they've just reshaped the way I think about everything.
Well, and there's yet again another wave of shut up and sing, shut up and play,
Mhm.
don't get political in your books. I only have two responses to that.
Blow Yeah. Yep.
Those are both of them.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
very much fall in the same camp as Chuck Wendig, Gabino Iglesias, Chris
Right.
Golden, a lot of these folks that I respect.
Yep.
No, I'm political as fuck.
Hell yeah.
Because you know what? Life is political,
Political.
and
Yeah.
politics, when politics stops affecting me, I will stop caring about politics.
Right.
But since I,
Yeah.
am constant, I'm living in constant fear every election cycle that my family and I will no longer be insurable because we weren't.
Right.
Until the Affordable Care Act was passed, we were on the please don't get sick healthcare plan because my wife has pre-existing conditions, one of which is being female,
Ah,
and that makes her uninsurable. She's a 55, four. I had to think about what the date is. She's a 54-year-old woman who had a hysterectomy. She's uninsurable without the Affordable Care Act.
right.
And I'm self-employed and fat. And I was turned down for health insurance multiple times.
Right.
So yeah, when politics stops affecting my life, I'll stop talking about politics.
Fair enough. I'm with you. All right. So not only are you an author, but you're a publisher. And as you and I both know, being a publisher or an author, it just ain't easy. So talk to me about Falstaff Books. So how did that come together and what was your motivation?
Like most of my life, I kind of fell into it.
Yep.
I had a couple of friends, Sarah Adams and Emily Leverett, who were working on a book. And I had been I had read a couple of drafts of this book and really thought it had something to say. I thought it was a good book, thought it was a good story. And I pushed it to one of my publishers that I was working with, pushed it to some agents that I was friendly with. They just were not getting any traction, even with what little help I could provide. And they came up to me and said, we think we're just going to self-publish it. This was at a convention in June of 2015. And I said, oh, please God, don't. And I said, why? You self-publish and you're doing well. I said, yeah, but y'all suck at social media. You hate self-promotion. You're both tenure track or tenured college professors, and you both have major life changes that you're planning in the next few years. You'll never sell a book. I'll tell you what, if you don't sell it to a press or an agent by the end of the year, I'll publish the damn thing next year and it'll be fine. When you tell a writer, I'll
Won't
publish it.
publish it. That's all they heard. That's all they heard.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So about November, I get an email that says, so did you mean it? And I thought about it for a second. I was like, I did. So Changeling's Fall was the first book in the Icefod Chronicles. Book 4 will come out next spring.
Mhm. And
Um,
yeah. So and to date, how many titles have you published all in?
I don't really know.
Is it 50? Is it
It's about 300.
300? Okay. And
Yeah. There was a period of time when we were doing 50 plus a year.
that's a big
We
number.
have scaled that back dramatically. There's a reason there's no color left in this.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. And the genres that you typically publish are
All commercial genre fiction, science fiction, fantasy, horror, romance, thriller, mystery, cozy fantasy, romantasy, lit RPG, if we
right,
got a good one,
right.
military sci-fi we've done, military fantasy we've done. We don't do, as a rule, we don't do memoir, we don't do poetry, we don't do lit fic, we don't do historical fiction as a rule. I have, in fact, published literary fiction, memoir, and
Right.
poetry.
All right, fair enough. All right.
But it's not what we really do.
All right, that was great. But now it's a time for a special segment on the show where we spin the wheel on the wheel of 7 possible categories, including a few new ones I created for the show. Wherever it lands is what you get. And the categories are Stranger in a Strange Land, Creature Feature, Soundtrack of Your Life, I Am Rocket Man, No Such Luck, Attack of the Clones, and The Reanimator. All right, you ready?
I'm a little terrified. Go for it.
As you should be. And all right, round and round she goes. Where she stops, nobody knows. What do we
The
got?
best part for everybody else watching is I've been recently diagnosed with cataracts.
Oh, so you're
Russ could tell me whatever he wants, and I won't have any idea what that little scribble says.
all right, here we go. All right, so no such luck. So Obi-Wan Kenobi famously said that in his experience, there's no such thing as luck. Yet some people do seem to be lucky while others seem to be unlucky. Do you believe in luck as some cosmic force that intervenes on our lives positively or negatively? Or do you believe that we make our own luck?
Yes. I believe that random things happen and they are unpredictable. And if it's good for you, it's good luck. And if it's bad for you, it's bad luck. I believe that the people who get the luckiest are the people who work the hardest.
Funny how those seem to go together.
If you find me any writer who has had any level of success and they claim to have done it all on their own without any bit of luck, I will point to the picture of that person and show you either a moron or a liar.
There you go. Fair enough. All right.
Because just by missing, Travis Baldree worked for a long time as an incredibly talented narrator and a skilled and talented writer. And then Legends and Lattes blew up. But how? If you pin him down and tickle him till he submits, he won't be able to give you an actual answer. Nobody knows what makes a hit.
Until it's a
So
hit.
there's a little luck. Now, Travis worked his ass off for a lot of years, made connections within the industry, did great work, wrote really good books, worked his ass off. So he deserved to get lucky.
Yeah, it's that classic story, like the overnight success that took 15 years to happen.
I can point you towards dozens of those. Chuck Gannon
Yep.
is what, a 5-time Nebula finalist?
Yep.
His first book contract was offered in the 80s, and he didn't get that book out and went off and did a whole nother career before coming back to this. Matt Dinniman. Matt Dinniman's the hottest thing in publishing right now, right? I mean, Dungeon Crawler Carl's as big a book as there has been in the last few years. Matt Dinniman's first book was published in 2004. And then Dungeon Crawler Carl came out 16 years later.
All right. So there, good on you. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pick your poison. I got 3 choices for you. I'm not going to tell you what's behind each, but you can pick A, B, or C.
C.
C. All right.
Like
C.
my algebra scores.
All right. There you go. All right. That's alt history spoils. I'm going to give you 2 alt history scenarios. You can only choose one. All right.
Okay.
Choice number 1. You can pick one key narrative from our history from any point within your lifetime and rewrite the narrative to your liking. But you don't get to enjoy the spoils yourself, and no one will ever know what you did. Or you get to be a part of it. Everyone knows what you did, but you personally suffer tremendous losses as a result that would likely ruin the rest of your life, but everyone else gets the spoils. Which alt life do you pick?
I'll take A. I do a fair bit of behind the scenes work at various conventions and nonprofits around. That's not something that I care if people know that I do. And I think that there are pieces of our history that I would happily rewrite and say, and fine, okay, I don't get the bonus, but okay, enough other people do, it'll be worth it.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
No, I'd rather, honestly, because if I fix the world and everybody knows I fixed the world, having everybody know it feels more like a downside than an upside to me. I've never wanted to be famous. I'd love to be writer famous and
Right.
rich.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to be rich.
Sure. Yes.
And writer famous would be great because then
Yes.
all my convention travel
Yeah.
is paid for and
Totally
I'm
right.
treated like a rock star for
Yep.
those weekends,
Oh, I hear you. Yes.
but I can still go buy my own groceries
That's right.
and the people at the game store where I go play Magic
Right.
don't look at me weird.
That's
I
right.
mean, no weirder than anybody else.
You know what? Writer, famous, and rich is the perfect combo. I got the lifestyle that I want, and I can be completely anonymous whenever I want.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Jim Butcher don't have to get a frickin' bodyguard to go to the grocery store
Right.
unless he's going to the grocery store in the middle of Dragon Con.
Right. There you go. All right.
Yeah, no, let me be Jim Butcher famous. Or yeah,
Sounds good to me. All right. I'm going to give you some truth serum. I got 10 questions. You ready?
hit it.
Okay. Favorite flavor ice cream?
Cookies and cream.
Ooh. What's one food you will never eat ever for any reason?
Chicken livers.
Bucket list destination anywhere in the world.
New Zealand.
Been there and I love it. Scariest movie you ever saw?
God, it was probably a documentary. The last 5 years of CNN count. Um,
It should.
One movie in my life has ever given me a nightmare.
Okay.
The Wrath of Khan, the first one.
Really? Really? I was just on
Dude, that thing in the ear.
ear in the ear. I was on a
Oh
panel
my
last
God.
night talking about Rathacon. Yes, I know
Oh
that.
my God, that thing in the ear. Yeah.
Yes, yes. All right, fair enough. Wow, cool one. Okay. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Flight.
Do you play a musical instrument? And if not, which one if you could?
No, and guitar if I could.
Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Favorite cocktail? And if you don't drink, your favorite unwind beverage?
Margarita. Rocks. Salt. House tequila is fine because I plan on drinking enough of them to not taste it.
Fair enough. You can see a live performance, sports, music, theater, whatever, any seat, any venue, any time in history. What's your choice?
Ooh. First performance of The Highwaymen. Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, and Johnny Cash. First live performance of the Highwaymen, and I want dead center of the house, right in front of the soundboard.
Wow.
I
Okay.
want to. Spoiler for those of you who haven't done live production, the first 5 rows are shit for seats.
Yes.
If you get to pick your seat, be as close to where the person mixing the audio is as possible because you'll hear what they're hearing and they're going to make it sound the best to them. In a theatrical venue, this usually means the first couple of rows of the first balcony or grand mezzanine.
All right. Fair enough. All right. So we're going to take some questions of the audience if we have any. I don't see any in the chat box. So real quick, we're going to go to our advice column. What's the best and worst writing advice anyone's ever given you? Something that you would pass along to aspiring writers.
Right every day. It's the best and the worst writing advice that I have gotten or given. When you're starting out, developing consistency in your writing habits is very important.
Yep.
And when you're on deadline, having that is important. But a lot of us are mentally fragile creatures, and having that pressure on you every day can paralyze you as much as it motivates you. So you have to write every day is both the best and worst writing advice I feel like we can give to baby writers.
Fair enough. All right. So we got one question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned your ADHD. How has that affected your life?
In so many ways that I didn't realize. I was not diagnosed until I was over 40. So there are hacks that I've created for myself that I didn't even realize were because of my ADHD. My keys only go in one place. And if my wife moves them, I freak out because I know I'll never find them. I don't borrow things from people because I don't return them. And then I just find this stuff and I'm like, where did this come from? Oh, yeah, Jonathan loaned that to me. I need to get that back to him. 6 months later, where did this come from? Oh, Jonathan loaned that to me. I need to. So there are tons of ways that my ADHD has affected my life. Since being diagnosed, I do have a standing Adderall script from my doc. I don't take it every day because I don't like the side effects. Also, being fat, I have high blood pressure, and taking speed every day when you have high blood pressure is not good for you. Um, Note for my coke heads out there, lay off. So I keep my Adderall stashed until it's time to focus on something for more than my 45 to an hour and 15, which is my normal span of focus. And I've built my life as a writer and publisher. I live and die by the to-do list. Please don't freeze that and see what I'm late on this month. But I try very hard to set myself reasonable goals for my to-do list. I write down all the stupid crap I need to do in a day, but I know I'm not going to get to all of it. So I give myself some grace. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I need to get 10 things checked off my to-do list. This is the 14th item on my to-do list for today. So today was a win.
There you go. All right.
So those are ways that I have tried to mitigate the impact of my ADHD on my life. You know, it's funny because it's just been within the past few years that I came to accept the neurodivergent tag for myself
Hmm.
because I didn't think it applied to ADHD. And then I was like, wait a minute, that's literally exactly what it applies to, you idiot. It's like disability. I'm hard of hearing. And I never considered that a partial disability or a disability until I watched Hawkeye, the TV show. And I saw someone going through life being hard of hearing, not deaf,
Right.
either little d deaf or big D deaf. And I was like, yeah, okay, I do. When I'm talking to people, I'm usually looking over one shoulder because this is my good ear. If
Oh,
you ever eat with me at a convention, you'll notice that when me and the Falstaff crew assemble, they always leave a specific seat for me because it puts everyone on my, I try not to put people on my left
yeah.
side because this is
Yeah.
my bad ear. I only have about 40% of the hearing in this ear.
That's right. We did.
So,
When we had dinner, we had wings. I was on your right side. That's right.
mhm.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen now. I got some stuff to share for everyone, and then we're going to call it a day. So just bear with me for a minute. Let's make sure I do this right. Okay. What do we have?
Hey, look, no porn. Good job.
There we go. All right. So tell me what I'm looking at here.
You're looking at the cover to The Seven, Unforgiven, my most recent release. This is a high fantasy Seven Samurai, or for those of you who are um, less versed in Kurosawa, a high fantasy Magnificent Seven. If you like Raymond Feist, Mercedes Lackey, Tad Williams, David Eddings, you will probably enjoy this book. It's very much a found family book. It's about a retired group of mercenaries. It's also very similar in tone to Nicholas Eames's Kings of the Wild. So think of a ragtag band of mercenaries that have retired, and then all of a sudden, this young guy walks into a bar owned by the character on the screen, um, Leshru of the Broken Blade. And this kid walks in and puts a coin down on the bar to pay for his drink, and Lesh says, "Where'd you get that? You're not supposed to have that." Because the coin he pays with isn't money, it's a challenge coin essentially from the seven, and only seven of them were ever, and thanks to magic, could ever be made. And the kid said, "She was my mother, and she's been murdered. It's time for the seven to ride again.
There you go. All
So
right.
they do.
Right on. So is this out now or is it coming
It,
out?
it is out now. It is available everywhere books and ebooks are sold, and it's also available from the Falstaff Books Shopify site.
All right.
So you can go there and get it. It's falstaffbooks.myshopify.com.
All right, guys, you hear that? So if you want the Magnificent Seven and high fantasy, this is the place to go. I highly pick it up. John is a fantastic writer, so do yourself a treat and pick up a copy for yourself. All right, as for me, I'm thrilled to showcase Trigger Point, the newest book in my ongoing series featuring hard-boiled private detective Angela Hardwick. In my mind, Hardwick is part Blade Runner, part Doctor Who, and part John Wick. So in Trigger Point, Hardwick has recently been released from prison for reasons I will not explain, and as her first case back on the street, she's hired by a really nasty pimp to track down whoever killed his best earner. And this isn't about business for him, it's personal. She's super reluctant to take the case, but she's got some history with this guy, again, for reasons I will not explain, and she needs a payday. But along the way, her partner and protege, Eric Whistler, suddenly goes missing. So she's torn between tracking down the killer of sex workers and her missing partner. But meanwhile, the fabric of space-time is literally beginning to crack, dragging Hardwick into a realm of nightmares, symbolism, and the dreamscape. And it forces her to confront demons that she hoped would stay buried forever. This is probably the most dangerous case of her career, which is really saying something if you've read the other novels in the series, and it really pushes Hardwick to the brink. Trigger Point's it just came out 2 weeks ago. It's already getting great reviews, even better than I thought, with the finale being ranked as maybe one of my best ever, and I really try to make sure that I stick the landing. Trigger Point's available on Amazon in ebook and paperback, and available published by Crazy 8 Press. And I want to be clear, every book in the series, and this is book 5, is a standalone sci-fi thriller with a lot of noir, so you can read them in any order. It doesn't matter. I reintroduce the characters and the world building every time out, so you know exactly where you are and where you need to be. Okay, everyone, that's our show. I want to thank my guest, John G. Hartness, for talking to us about his life and his career. And I want to thank everyone who's watching at home. And if you want to see me live, I will be at the Hoboken Library Book Festival this weekend, Saturday, September 21st, and at other venues throughout the fall. And as always, be gentle, be kind, be generous of spirit, and for God's sake, go read a book. And I'll see you guys all next week. Take
Bye,
care.
nerds.
All right, guys. Thanks, and I'll check you out next time. Be good.